The sharp howl of the winter wind rattled the metal panels of Frostbite Kitchen, long before anyone noticed the sound. Inside the dim glow of the old oil heater, spoons paused midair, steam rising from cheap styrofoam bowls. Even Helen Ward, frail, wrapped in her patched gray coat, froze with her trembling hand over her soup. Megan Clark stopped wiping a table, breath fogging in the icy air. Then it came. A deep, rolling thunder of engines cut through the snowy Denver underpass. 3 polished black SUVs crept into the alley like shadows that didn't belong in a place this poor. People lifted their heads. Someone whispered, "Are those government cars?" Another muttered, "Is someone in trouble?" The SUVs stopped directly in front of Jake Lawson's battered food truck. The same truck held together with duct tape, frozen bolts, and stubborn hope. Jake's grip tightened around the ladle, knuckles whitening. Megan's heart kicked hard in her chest. And Thor, the 6-year-old German shepherd in his black service harness, rose to his feet with a low, warning rumble. The doors clicked open. Something was coming. Something that would rewrite all of their lives. The woman by the frozen bus stop, snow hammered the sleeping city of Denver in hard, wind-driven sheets. Wind clawed its way down the empty street, whipping loose flyers from lampposts and driving powdery snow into every crack of the pavement. The bus stop at the corner of Blake and 2nd sat abandoned, a glass shelter turned into a thin, useless shield against the storm. Megan Clark trudged toward it like a ghost that had forgotten how to walk. She looked older than her 32 years, the way cold and hunger carved lines where time hasn't yet earned the right. Her frame was thin, almost fragile, wrapped in a once black winter coat, now faded to a tired charcoal, the seams at the shoulders shiny with wear. A gray sweater, too big for her, poked out at the wrists, its cuffs stiff with old stains and frozen damp. Her hair, a dull chestnut brown, hung in unbrushed waves around her face, tangled with tiny beads of snow. Strands stuck to her chapped lips when the wind blew directly at her. Her skin, naturally olive, had turned a pale, mottled tone, the color of someone who had spent too many nights with concrete for a mattress and sky for a ceiling. Her cheeks were hollow. Her green eyes, once bright, once curious, now moved slowly, as if each blink cost energy she did not have. Megan's boots had once been tan. Now they were the gray of slush, seams splitting at the toes so that the cold slid in and licked at her socks. She could feel the icy water with every step, felt it crawl up her feet like a slow, cruel fire. "One more block," she muttered, though no one was there to hear. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken to another human in days. The bus stop was not a destination. It was simply the only place she knew, with a roof that wasn't already claimed. Parks were locked. Storefronts chased her away with polite smiles and tight eyes. The shelters were full or dangerous in their own ways. The bus stop had glass, a bench, and a corner where the wind might miss her if it was inattentive. That was enough to keep her moving. Her stomach twisted with a slow, hollow ache, but the feeling felt far away now. Hunger had burned sharply 3 days ago. Now it was a dull, familiar ghost, floating behind the more urgent need to simply stay conscious. Her thoughts veered in and out of focus like a radio losing signal. She remembered fluorescent lights and the smell of coffee from a real machine, back when she still worked as a barista. She remembered laughing with coworkers about difficult customers, remembered the apron that made her feel like she belonged somewhere, even if it was just behind a counter. Then she remembered the moment that life cracked. The hospital hallway, the white bed where her mother lay too still, the unpaid bills, the slow slide from "I'll manage" to "I can't stay" to "I have nowhere." The wind shoved those memories aside as another gust hit her full in the chest. Megan stumbled, one hand reaching for the metal pole of a street sign that had turned to ice under her fingers. The cold bit into her skin like thousands of tiny needles. "Don't stop," she whispered to herself. "You stop. You sleep. You sleep. You don't wake up." She had heard that warning from other people on the street, people whose faces she couldn't remember, but whose voices had the same tired weight as hers now. Her body, however, no longer cared about warnings. Each breath came out as a small, ragged cloud. Her lungs hurt, as if the air itself was glass. Her legs shook under her, muscles trembling with the effort of lifting and placing each foot. The bus stop was finally in sight, a blur of glass and metal, half buried in drifting snow. It might as well have been a castle. Megan took another step, then another. The world narrowed down to 3 things: the white swirl of snow, the burning in her chest, and the thin, desperate thought pulsing in her mind. Just make it to the bench. Just sit down. just for a minute. Her vision began to shimmer at the edges. Streetlights stretched into long, hazy streaks of yellow. The stop sign at the corner doubled, then tripled. "I'm fine," she lied to herself. "I'm just tired." Her right foot did not quite find the curb. She stumbled, arms flailing, boots sliding on ice hidden beneath the new snow. Her knee hit the ground first, sending a jolt of pain up her thigh, but even that felt distant, muffled behind the thick blanket of exhaustion wrapping around her. She pressed one hand to the ground to push herself back up. The snow was softer than concrete, but just as lethal. Her fingers sank in. The cold flooded through her thin gloves and gripped her bones. For a heartbeat, she stayed there on one knee, chest heaving, hair falling over her face. "Maybe I could just lie down," a soft, dangerous voice whispered in her mind. "Just for a little while, just until the wind calms down." Her head drooped forward, and then, cutting through the howl of the storm, came a sound that did not belong to wind or traffic. A bark. Not loud, not frantic, just one short, low, controlled bark from somewhere up the street. Megan's head lifted slowly, as if it weighed 20 pounds. She squinted through the spinning snow. At first she saw nothing, only the swirling white illuminated by a distant streetlight. Then the blizzard shifted like a curtain, and a shape emerged. A dog. It was large, with a powerful, lean frame built for work rather than show. Its coat was a rich mix of black and tan, the black forming a dark saddle along its back, the tan gleaming faintly on its legs and face even in the dim light. Its ears stood straight, sharp triangles against the storm, and its eyes, dark amber, alert, intelligent, were fixed on her. Wrapped around its chest was a black harness, snug but comfortable, with bold white letters that Megan's blurry vision still managed to catch. "Service dog, do not pet." The dog took a step forward, paw sinking into the snow, then another. It did not charge or leap. It moved with purpose, calm and focused, as if the storm were nothing more than an inconvenient background noise. Megan's lips parted. For a heartbeat, she thought she must be hallucinating. Service dogs didn't just appear out of nowhere in the middle of the night to stare at homeless women who'd lost everything. But the dog was real enough to send up another low bark, this time mixed with a short, sharp whine that carried something almost like concern. Behind the dog, partially swallowed by the storm, a darker shape moved. For a moment, Megan saw the outline of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a long navy coat that flapped in the wind. She thought she saw the curve of a knit beanie, the faint gleam of something pinned to it near the temple. The figure moved with a slight hitch, a stiffness in one leg, as if each step over the ice had to be calculated around an old injury. But before the shape fully resolved, before the yellow glow of a distant street lamp could fall on his face, Megan's body finally surrendered. The last of her strength slipped away like someone turning off a light. Her knees buckled. She pitched sideways into the snow, the world tilting, the bus stop, the dog, the distant man all spinning together in a blur of white and gray. Her cheek hit the frozen ground. Cold seeped in instantly, numbing, relentless. The night narrowed to a tunnel. At the far end of it, she heard one more sound, that same dog barking again. Still controlled, still measured, but urgent now, as if calling someone to hurry. The storm swallowed the rest. Snow filled her vision until there was nothing left but white. Megan's eyes slipped closed, and somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, as the wind roared around the empty bus stop, the only unanswered question hanging in the frozen air was whether the man in the navy coat would reach her in time. Under the warm light of the street-side kitchen, the first thing Megan felt was heat. Not the soft warmth of a blanket or a heater in a real home, but a harsh, almost metallic kind of heat, like standing too close to a stove. It pulsed across her frozen skin, crawling into her bones as if trying to chase winter out of her. She opened her eyes slowly. A small, dim space swam into view, metal shelves stacked with dented cans. A narrow counter holding mismatched bowls, a flickering portable heater shoved near her feet. The air smelled of broth, onions, and the faint smoky scent of something burnt into the walls over years. She was lying on a foldable camp cot tucked into the corner of an old food truck. And sitting near her, watching in absolute silence, was a dog. The German Shepherd, massive, alert, perfectly still, rested in a sphinx-like pose. His black and tan coat caught the light in sharp contrasts, the dark saddle on his back gleaming like polished leather. His eyes, a deep amber, were fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and vigilance. The black harness across his chest stretched with each steady breath. The patch was unmistakable. Service dog, do not pet. Megan blinked at him, confused. Hey, she whispered, her voice barely a sound. The dog tilted his head slightly, not threatening, simply attentive, almost protective. Then the truck door slammed open. A man stepped inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a frame built from years of discipline rather than vanity. His navy winter coat, still dusted with snowflakes, hung down to mid-thigh. Beneath it, a red and black flannel peeked through, the fabric softened by years of wear. His jeans were faded, boots scuffed from long roads, long shifts, and memories he never mentioned aloud. His face was angular, rugged in a way that suggested both strength and exhaustion. A square jaw lined with neatly trimmed stubble, peppered with a few silvery strands, framed a mouth set in a straight, controlled line. His eyes were a deep brown, warm by nature, but sharpened now in concern. The knit beanie pulled over his head bore a small pin stamped with 4 familiar words. U.S. Army Veteran. Jake Lawson didn't smile when he saw her awake, but his shoulders relaxed just a little. "You're up," he said, voice low, rough like gravel dragged across concrete. He moved with a slight stiffness, the left leg dragging for half a second before realigning, a permanent reminder of a battlefield half a world away. Megan pushed herself up on her elbows, head spinning. I didn't mean to be here," she croaked. Jake set a steaming mug on the crate beside her. "You collapsed. Thor found you." He jerked his chin toward the dog. Megan managed a faint, shaky smile in Thor's direction. "Thank you," she whispered. Thor let out a soft huff, then laid his head on his paws, as if modest about the whole thing. Jake crossed his arms. "This truck isn't a shelter," he said flatly. "People come here for soup, maybe warmth, if they're lucky. That's it." Megan nodded quickly, fear tightening her throat. "I'm sorry. I'll go. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Sit down." Jake's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through her apology like a blade. "You can't walk in that condition. And even if you could, the storm would kill you in 10 minutes. He picked up a ladle and stirred a huge pot of soup simmering on a gas stove bolted to the counter. The scent of chicken broth drifted toward her, thick and comforting. "Eat first," he muttered. Megan hesitated. Jake didn't look impatient, just resigned, like he'd had this argument before with other people at their lowest. She wrapped her trembling fingers around the mug. The warmth stung her palms at first, then slowly soothed them. Jake watched her take the first sip. He wasn't judging her. He wasn't pitying her. He simply looked, calm, tired, and quietly making sure she didn't die in front of him. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the heater sputtered weakly but valiantly. A soft knock on metal made them both turn. The truck's side door slid open. An elderly woman stepped inside, clutching the frame to steady herself. She was small and impossibly thin, wrapped in a long gray coat whose buttons no longer matched. Wisps of white hair peeked out from beneath a knitted hat, the color of wilted sage. Her brown skin, warm and soft-toned, had the papery texture of someone who had spent too many seasons outside. Her back curved gently forward, not from defeat, but from years of carrying grief alone. Her eyes, pale, weary hazel, brightened slightly when she spotted the dog. "Evening, Thor," she whispered with a frail smile. Thor stood and nuzzled her hand gently. Jake's posture softened. "Mrs. Ward," he said, nodding. "Cold tonight." "Colder than last year?" she murmured. Her voice trembled, though whether from age or the weather, Megan couldn't tell. Jake ladled soup into a bowl and handed it to her without ceremony. She accepted it with both hands, whispering, "Bless you, son." Jake didn't respond. He simply looked away, clearing his throat as if embarrassed by kindness. Megan pushed herself upright. "Is she okay?" she asked quietly. Jake shrugged one shoulder. "She comes here most nights, doesn't talk much, eats little, gives Thor whatever bread she can't finish." His gaze flicked toward the old woman, who was now seated on an upside-down milk crate, blowing softly on her soup. "She's tough, though, tougher than she looks." Megan studied the older woman more closely. Mrs. Helen Ward moved delicately, as if every joint had a story of pain. But when she looked up, her smile, small, fleeting, held a warmth Megan hadn't seen in months. Something inside Megan cracked softly. A longing, a recognition. Jake caught her expression. "You stay here," he said, in that same blunt tone. "Not for free. If you stay, you work. You wash dishes, sweep, hand out bowls, whatever needs doing. Megan swallowed. I can do that. I know you can, Jake said. If I thought otherwise, Thor wouldn't have brought you here. At her puzzled look, he added, he doesn't pick just anyone. Trust me. The heater buzzed. The soup boiled gently. Snow scraped against the metal roof like fingers tapping for entry. Inside that cramped, worn food truck, the four of them, a soldier, a drifter, a widow, and a service dog, shared the smallest spark of warmth in the coldest winter Denver had seen in years. None of them said it aloud, but something like a family had taken its first quiet breath. Night of the blizzard and the Cree in the dark, the storm hit harder than anyone expected. Dough slammed against the metal walls of the food truck in violent bursts, making the entire frame tremble like it was breathing in fear. The wind screamed through the gaps beneath the overpass, turning every draft into a sharp slap of icy air. Outside, the world was a blur of white and shadow. Streets swallowed, sidewalks erased, landmarks turned ghostly and indistinct. Inside Frostbite Kitchen, the heat from the stove barely kept the cold at bay. People packed into the cramped space, men and women whose faces were drawn thin by hunger, whose clothes were layered in mismatched sweaters, torn jackets, and duct-taped boots. Their breath fogged in front of them. Every few seconds, someone shivered violently. A few clutched paper cups of soup as if they were lifelines. Megan moved between them carefully, carrying a stack of dented bowls. Her face still carried the fragility of someone recovering from collapse, but her hands were steady. The stale warmth of the truck gave her just enough strength to stand, to help, to belong. Thor stayed close to her side, his large frame brushing against her leg every time she passed him. His ears were high, flicking constantly toward the storm outside. Jake stood near the stove, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The heat made his skin flush lightly, highlighting the rugged angles of his face. His jaw tightened each time the truck shuddered. His left leg stiffened when he shifted his weight, a subtle, lingering pain he could never quite hide. Still, he worked with calm precision, ladling soup, passing it down the line, making sure no one went hungry. Careful at the door, he muttered to Megan as another gust shoved against it. Storm's getting worse. Megan nodded. It feels like the wind's trying to knock the whole truck over. Before Jake could respond, a frail cough came from the far corner. Mrs. Helen Ward sat on the crate she always claimed. Her gray coat wrapped tight around her thin frame, hands trembling as she held a bowl of soup close to her lips. Her face looked paler than usual, her breath shorter, forced. The skin beneath her eyes seemed bruised with exhaustion. Megan hurried toward her. Mrs. Ward, are you feeling all right? The old woman smiled faintly, but it lacked the gentle warmth she usually offered. Just tired, dear, she murmured. Her voice cracked on the final word. Thor approached her, sniffing at her hands, letting out a soft, uneasy whine. It caught Jake's attention instantly. He frowned. Something's wrong. Before Megan could answer, the truck door slammed open. A blast of freezing air shot inside, scattering napkins, rattling pans, and extinguishing the small candle perched on a counter. People flinched, turning toward the door. 3 men stepped inside. They were the same group that had come a week earlier, the ones who had demanded protection money. But tonight, they carried more than threats. The first man was tall and lanky, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw covered in uneven stubble. He wore a puffy black coat with a ripped sleeve, and a beanie pulled so low it nearly covered his eyes. His mouth twisted into a cruel smirk as he scanned the cramped space. Behind him stood a heavier man, broad shoulders, thick neck, buzzed hair, and a face flushed red from cold and anger. A tattoo snaked down one side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. He gripped a baseball bat, tapping it lightly against his palm. The third was the shortest but the most unsettling. Thin as wire, eyes darting in every direction, fingers twitching around the handle of a knife. His pale skin looked almost blue under the harsh truck lights, and his lips were trembling. Whether from cold or excitement, no one could tell. "Evening, folks," the lanky man drawled. "Looks like business is booming." Jake didn't move from behind the counter, but his posture shifted. Shoulders squared, feet planted. His eyes, normally warm brown, hardened into something sharp, calculating, the kind of gaze carved from war and survival. "I told you before," Jake said quietly, "we're not interested in your protection." The man with the knife stepped forward, blade glinting under the flickering light. "Then maybe you'll be interested in what happens if you refuse again." Thor growled. a low, vibrating warning that filled the space with tension. Megan stepped instinctively in front of Mrs. Ward, who clutched her chest, her breath growing thinner. The heavy man with the bat swung it down on the counter. The metal shook. Bowls rattled. Soup splashed. People gasped. Jake didn't flinch, but he took one step forward, calculated, steady, protective. "Put it down," he murmured. "Oh?" the lanky man sneered. "Or what? You gonna limp your way over here and stop us?" The insult hung in the air, but Jake didn't take the bait. He didn't move. He didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on the knife. Then, suddenly, a thin cry pierced the moment. Mrs. Ward's hand jerked toward her chest. Her bowl slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor, soup splashing across the rubber mat. "Mrs. Ward!" Megan screamed. The old woman collapsed seatways. Megan caught her just before her head hit the floor, cradling her shaking body. Thor barked sharply, spinning toward the intruders, placing himself between Megan and the men. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the truck so hard that everyone swayed. The man with the knife jerked back. "What the hell?" Jake stepped forward, but the lanky man lifted the blade defensively. And for one heartbeat, the world held its breath. Snow howled. Mrs. Ward gasped weakly. Thor growled deeper. Megan sobbed for help. Knife glinted. Bat swung back. The propane tank at the rear of the truck trembled in the cold. Violence was seconds away. Then, sirens. A bright flash of red and blue tore through the storm. The heavy man cursed. "It's the cops!" The door slammed open again as the wind howled through it. The men fled into the blizzard, footprints vanishing almost instantly into the swirling snow. Silence fell, but only for a second. Because Mrs. Ward, lying in Megan's arms, suddenly exhaled a long, shaky breath and didn't inhale again. Her skin went gray. Her pulse fluttered like a dying bird. Her eyelids flickered. "Jake," Megan cried. "She's fainting. Her heart. She's not breathing right." Jake dropped to his knees beside them. "Stay with us, Mrs. Ward," he urged. But her breaths were fading. Her body felt too light, too cold. Thor whimpered, nudging her shoulder gently, and in that cramped truck, surrounded by the smell of soup and fear and winter, their smallest family member slipped deeper into danger. The brawl was gone, but their worst fear had just begun. The sun, who stepped out of the black SUV's snow had finally stopped falling, but the cold lingered like a bruise across Denver. The streets still glistened with a thin sheet of ice, and the world seemed quieter than usual, as if the storm had stolen voices along with warmth. For 3 days, Frostbite Kitchen reopened in a hush. No laughter, no casual chatter, just the steady simmer of soup and the ghost of worry hanging over every breath. Mrs. Helen Ward lay in the hospital, fighting against the frailty of her own heart. Megan visited every morning, bringing the old widow a small bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers. Jake visited every night, sitting silently by her bedside, big hands folded awkwardly in his lap. Thor waited in the hallway, lying perfectly still, as if guarding the doorway from bad news. Back at the truck, the customers, those who had found refuge there during the storm, came and went with murmured questions. Will she be all right? Was it her heart? Jake looks exhausted, but Jake Lawson never answered. He just kept working, his navy coat shedding snowflakes, his eyes darker than usual. The lines around his mouth deepened each time he thought no one was looking. Memories of combat flashed behind his gaze, moments where he had held the wounded and helpless, moments where he had failed. To him, Mrs. Ward was not just an old woman. She was a reminder of promises he had broken long ago, in deserts far from home. Megan watched him, feeling something ache quietly inside her. She didn't know the details of his past, but she recognized the shape of guilt. If pain had a posture, it was the way Jake held his shoulders, tense, lifted, ready to bear a weight that wasn't his. On the 4th morning, the air was unusually still. The city seemed to hold its breath. Megan was wiping down the counter when Thor's ears shot up. He stood from where he had been lying, tail stiff, muscles tightening beneath his black and tan coat, his amber eyes fixed on the road. Jake noticed immediately. "What is it, buddy?" Thor didn't bark. He simply stared. Then they heard it, a deep, smooth rumble rolling toward them like a storm made of engines. Megan stepped outside. The air was brittle and sharp, her breath turning white in an instant. Then she saw them. 3 black SUVs, sleek, polished, tinted windows, moving down the icy street with deliberate slowness. They turned in a synchronized line, and stopped directly beside the truck. Their engines continued to hum, a low vibration that seemed too big, too heavy for the quiet afternoon. The doors opened. From the first vehicle stepped a man in his early 40s, tall, straight-backed. His gray wool overcoat reached past his knees, tailored to fit his lean, commanding frame. He had the posture of someone who had spent years being obeyed. His dark hair was cut short in a close military style, the sides neat and precise. His skin was warm-toned, olive with a hint of sun-weathered bronze, and his jaw was sharp, clean-shaven, showing discipline in every angle. His eyes, icy blue, piercing, scanned the surroundings with the rapid assessment of someone accustomed to danger. But beneath that toughness flickered something else. Grief, buried deep but never healed. Two other men followed, clearly security personnel. One tall and broad with a shaved head and tactical gloves, the other slimmer, dark-haired, scanning rooftops and corners with trained vigilance. They were not talkative men. Their body language was enough to tell stories. But the man in the gray coat was the center of gravity. He approached the food truck with long strides, boots crunching in the thin crust of remaining ice. Megan stiffened. Jake stepped forward. Thor moved between them like a living shield. The man stopped at the serving window. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of years. "Which one of you helped my mother?" Megan blinked. "Your mother?" The man inhaled sharply, almost a flinch. "My name is Michael Ward." He swallowed hard. "I was told my mother, Helen Ward, came here." Jake's expression shifted. "You're her son?" Michael nodded once, jaw tightening. "I've been searching for her for years. She disappeared after my father passed. Grief can take people places they shouldn't have to go." His voice cracked, just once. Megan stepped closer. "We fed her, as best we could." Thor sat at Jake's side, gaze fixed on the newcomer, sensing both danger and sorrow. Michael took another breath, then dropped to one knee in the snow. The security guards didn't stop him. They simply looked away. Michael's shoulders shook as he bowed his head. "Thank you," he said, a low whisper, "for keeping her alive." Then louder, "You gave my mother something I couldn't. Warmth, dignity, a reason to wake up in the morning." Jake blinked in shock. Megan pressed a hand to her chest. Michael reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, thick, official-looking. "I don't believe in debts of gratitude," he said, "but I believe in honoring miracles." He handed the folder to Megan. "Inside is the deed to a tiny house, fully paid. Your name is on it." Megan felt her knees weaken. Michael turned to Jake. "And funds to replace this truck, with a permanent kitchen, a building, not a vehicle, a place where no one will be turned away." He paused, voice trembling. "My mother survived because of people like you." Jake shook his head. "You don't owe us anything." Michael looked at him with raw, human gratitude. "My mother had a message," he whispered. "She said, 'Don't let them sleep outside anymore.' They saved me." Silence settled over them, powerful as prayer. The SUVs waited in stillness. Snow drifted gently from a sky that had seemed so cruel days before. Inside the food truck, a pot simmered. Outside, a son knelt in the snow for the strangers who saved his mother. Winter Hearth Diner. The fire and winter snow drifted down in soft spirals, gentle this time, no longer the violent blizzard that once rattled the metal walls of the truck. The city of Denver had entered the final stretch of winter, that rare quiet period where cold no longer threatened life, but lingered like a memory, shaping every breath. And at the very corner, where Frostbite Kitchen once struggled against the wind, a new building now stood. Winter Hearth Diner. Its wooden sign glowed under warm lantern lights, carved by hand, polished until it reflected every stray snowflake. Wide windows poured soft golden light onto the frozen street, making the diner look like a fireplace in the middle of a white desert. The walls were dark cedar, the roof metal and sturdy, and thin streams of smoke rose from the chimney, scented with spices, broth, and the promise of warmth. Inside, everything smelled like comfort. Jake Lawson stood behind the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled again to where his forearms showed strength without effort. His navy winter coat hung near the back door, replaced by the familiar red and black flannel, folded neatly under his apron. His shoulders looked less tense these days. His eyes, still dark brown, still sharp when needed, now carried a gentler fire, one that spoke of purpose, not survival. He ladled soup from a new steel pot, larger, cleaner, no longer stained by years of use. The upgraded equipment made him look strangely at peace, like a soldier finally given a safe place to stand guard. His gait still carried the old stiffness of the knee injury, but the pain no longer dominated him. Across the diner, Megan Clark stood at the order counter. She wore a simple dark green sweater, hair brushed, cheeks warm from the heat of the room. No longer frail, no longer shaking. Instead, her posture was straight, her steps confident, her smile soft but steady. She moved like someone who understood home not as a place, but as the people who held her up when the world collapsed. Her voice carried lightly through the diner. "One bowl of chicken stew and cornbread. Coming up. Have a seat anywhere you like." She met Jake's eyes across the room. He nodded. She nodded back. Some things didn't need words. Near the front door lay Thor, the loyal German shepherd, now considered the unofficial guardian of Winter Hearth Diner, rested exactly on the boundary between inside warmth and outside cold. His coat looked freshly brushed, black saddle gleaming, tan fur warm under the lantern glow. The harness he wore was new, sturdier, jet black with bright white letters reading, "Service Dog, Do Not Pet." Thor's eyes tracked every customer with quiet assessment, but his demeanor softened whenever someone shivered or limped or cried. He understood suffering in ways humans couldn't, and the diner, with Jake's leadership, had become his mission field. Tonight, Thor lifted his head as a gust of wind struck the gee. Door. He didn't growl, just observed. Sentry, protector, heart of the hearth. And near the back corner, bundled in a wool shawl, sat Mrs. Helen Ward. Her complexion, once gray as falling snow, now glowed faintly pink. The doctors still described her heart as delicate, but her spirit had grown louder, brighter, and full of life again. Her hands, thin, the skin soft and wrinkled, moved steadily as she knitted colorful scarves. Each scarf was different. Each scarf had a name attached. Each one belonged to a person who walked in with frostbite in their eyes. She hummed softly, a little off-key, a little tired, but content. When newcomers glanced her way, she always smiled like a grandmother greeting children returning from a long journey. Above her head, on a giant chalkboard written in Jake's careful handwriting, were the diner's new guiding words. "If you can't pay today, eat. No one is left behind in the winter." Many read it twice. Some cried, most just nodded. Evening fell fully. The first snowfall of the new season began again, gentle, glowing under the streetlights. Megan stepped to the front window, wiping fog from the glass, letting the sight settle into her heart. The street she once collapsed on was now a place she looked at with gratitude rather than fear. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "There was a time I thought I'd freeze out there, that night at the bus stop. I thought it was the end." Her breath trembled. A warm hand settled on her shoulder. Jake had moved silently, his presence solid, not overwhelming, but grounding. His palm rested steady, gentle, full of unspoken truths. "Winter can kill," he murmured. "But winter also shows who lights the fire." Megan swallowed, blinking back tears. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Thor stretched, trotting over, nudging Megan's leg with a gentle snort, before sitting loyally beside her feet. His amber eyes reflected the window's golden glow like two small lanterns. Behind them, Mrs. Helen chuckled softly, voice warm and amused. "Kindness always finds its way home," she said, "especially in winter." Jake looked around the diner. The steaming bowls, the mismatched chairs filled with strangers who no longer felt like strangers, the old widow smiling at her knitting, the service dog guarding them from both snow and sorrow, and the woman beside him, alive, strong, finally warm. He whispered, "This place, it's more than a diner, you know." Megan nodded. "It's a hearth." Outside, snow fell. Inside, the fire stayed lit. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. Sometimes they appear quietly, in a warm bowl of soup, in a hand that lifts you back to your feet, or in a small shelter that opens on the coldest night of winter. And often those miracles are not coincidences, but the gentle work of God, placing the right people in our path at the exact moment we need them. When we choose kindness, when we open our doors, when we let our hearts stay warm enough to warm someone else, God creates another miracle through us. Life is full of storms, but you never know. The person you help today may be the very person God sends to save you tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so more people can witness these small everyday miracles. May God bless you and your family. May He keep your heart warm, your home safe, and His light shining through every winter of your life.